All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Joey Wilson, and I'm with the American Institutes for Research, and I'm one of the co-principal investigators for CS for All Teachers, which is a virtual community for pre-K through 12 computer science teachers. And so we're excited to have Nicole host one of our first webinars of the season around exploring computer science, and we have Don and Dan who are also on here. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. You all seem to have figured out how to listen to us and turn on your microphones, and since we have a small enough group, you can either use the chat box if you'd like, or just ask us questions as we go through. This is a really good opportunity to just stop and ask whenever we can. And if you have colleagues who weren't able to make it, we are recording this, and this will be posted on the website, and we'll promote this on social media so you have access to it. And so with that, I will turn it over to Nicole.
Fantastic.
I will turn off my webcam.
Awesome. Thanks, Joey. I am excited to have some of my awesome friends here tonight, Don and Dan. And we've got a poll that we're going to be putting in here in just a second. So first thing we'd like to find out a little bit about your experience with Scratch. A lot of the changes in ECS version 8 have to do with Scratch. So to kind of lead our conversation, it would be great to have you kind of just go ahead and put in if you're a novice, apprentice, expert, or kind of master. Looks like we've got a couple who are novice, we've got some experts, got a few more people who have joined us. Now if you want to go ahead and fill out the poll, that would be awesome. Welcome, Jody. It looks like we've got a lot of novices on tonight and experts, not really any in between. So as we get going, this will be great to kind of gauge our conversation. So Joey, if you want to go ahead and give us access back to the slide deck, that'd be great. Awesome. So I'm Nicole. I am from Salt Lake City, Utah. And I'm lucky enough to be an ambassador for the CS for All community. It's a super fun opportunity to meet teachers from all over the nation that teach computer science. And with me tonight, we've got Don, who is a CSTA leader of the Chicago chapter. He also is a facilitator and an instructional coach for ECS. And we've got Dan, who is also from Chicago. He is another CSTA leader and an ECS facilitator. So I'm excited to have them join, share some of their expertise, and with such a small group, we can ask all sorts of great questions. So for those who are maybe new to computer science with ECS, there are 3 strands that ECS really ties into the curriculum and with the pedagogy. So that top strand is the computer science concepts that we want students to know, but we want them to gain those concepts through inquiry and with equity. And so as we go through a lot of the activities tonight, or thinking of some of the changes in the curriculum, keeping in mind those 3 strands, to me, is one of the most important things that we can keep as we're looking into those items. Now, the curriculum has 6 chapters. I know every state kind of has their requirements of how they can teach it. But as we look at those 6 chapters, we've got how we interact with computers, how we do problem solving with computers and off the computer, how you can get some of those math skills ready for web design in Unit 3, programming in Unit 4, Unit 5 looking at data and analysis, and Unit 6 which is robotics. Also with the curriculum, I think it's important to keep in mind those computational practices or things that computer scientists do as they do their practice. So with our students, we've got those practices that we are always looking to see that they're using in each of the units. Some of the units you might see more practices being used than others, but I think that the practices are important to keep in mind as well. And so we'll go on to some of the updates that we see in Unit 4, and I'll turn the time over to Don.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Thanks for joining us tonight. And so the big change for Unit 4 in version 8 is the addition of customized blocks, or being able to create your own blocks. And so the other thing was, when thinking about Unit 4, was really trying to emphasize the last two of the, and I'm just going to back up here, the last two of the computational practices, really stressing communicate computational thought processes and procedures and collaborate with peers. So there's a big emphasis on doing pair programming and peer review, and also a focus on culturally responsive projects. And what I mean by that is that projects now have are a little more open-ended, and we're asking students to really think of ideas that help us learn a little bit about them, or ways that they can activate their prior experience, especially some of their experience in their communities. And communities could be anything from other classrooms and topics to be their community at home, in their neighborhood, or clubs, or their church, or things like that. Just ways for them to incorporate their identity. So one, they can share that and hopefully be empowered, and also an opportunity for us as teachers to get to know them a little better. And most of the projects also, I guess I should tell you that I wrote the update for Unit 8 or Unit 4, so that's why I'm on the panel. I'm sorry, I should have led with that. So there's also an emphasis on storyboarding really at the beginning of every project. We see that at the beginning of Unit 3 in web design, and we'd really like to continue that problem-solving strategy into Unit 4. And like I said, an emphasis on pair programming. If you haven't heard of that before, it's a partnership protocol between two people where there are distinct roles. One person's a driver, another person's a navigator. The driver is the person that manipulates or controls the computer. The navigator is what you would think is somebody who helps give them directions. It doesn't mean that the driver can't speak. The driver can speak also. So this is really, like I said, a protocol to help them to be able to work together in a partnership better. They switch roles frequently, and as the teacher, you would decide that interval. This is a protocol that's used at the college level. It's used quite often in industry, and a lot of research shows that a partnership like this, people tend to enjoy it more, which is great for our students. They tend to be more creative, so their artifacts they create are more creative. And then also they tend to take more challenges and try harder things. So, and then I also put in trying to have some type of peer review for projects at the end of every assignment. And then the last thing is, when I was writing this, Scratch was saying, or MIT was saying, that the new version of Scratch 3.0 would be ready in August. Well, it wasn't ready in August. It's still in beta. I encourage you to go look it over. Really, there's two changes. There's a little bit of an update with the interface. So they've changed the place where the blocks are. In version 2.0 online, the blocks are in the middle. They moved those sort of over to the left and with buttons. So the interface has changed just a little bit. And also with version 3.0, the addition that now you can use an iPad or a tablet. So those of you that's a resource that you can have, or some of your students have tablets, or they might only have an Android phone or an iPhone, they could still program on those too. So, but like I said, it's still in beta. Hopefully by the time you reach Unit 4, that will be moved further along. But all the project solutions that are posted in the supplemental materials work in version 2, and there's also a version for version 1, the older version of Scratch. So all of those are included. So going on and just a little idea of what are the new projects. So like I said, there an emphasis on culturally responsive, so things hopefully that our students can identify with. There's storyboarding, the pair programming as driver navigator, and I also try to add extensions to many of the projects, which I call extra fun. I try and avoid using extra credit, so that students, I hope, would want to do more, not just because they expect to get more points, because they want a greater challenge and want to have more fun. So looking at the first of these on day 5 through 6, create a program using various moving blocks. That was a baseball type program where you had the sprite run around bases. I changed it to be something like I said, something that hopefully maybe more of our students could identify with, where they could take a screenshot of a Google map of maybe their neighborhood or the neighborhood around their school or a favorite place, a park, and they have to navigate a sprite through that map. The example that's given in the solution is actually my neighborhood, and it's a snowplow going around the neighborhood and coming back to my house. So if you're wondering where that is, it's in Chicago, hence the snowplow.
I love that.
Days 7 and 8, event-driven. So, clicking on things on the screen. This is an adventure game. I don't know if many of you have ever seen this before, where depending on what you click on the screen, you get a different story to turn out. So it's an opportunity, once again, for our students to tell us a little bit about who they are or their interests by creating their own story or adventure. And then day 10 and 3, or days 10 through 13 is still kind of the scratch stories, but with the addition that you could have them do something. And once again, there are rubrics with this, and a peer review rubric, where they could program a movie scene or a favorite scene from a story or a book. And and then finally, they create a program using or randomness, a social media quiz. I don't know how many of you ever tried those before, like, what type of place should, or what type of place should you really live? And you take a quiz and it tells you that you should, live in New Zealand or something. So students create that type of quiz that hopefully they're familiar with that from social media. If not, there's another option to do the Magic 8-Ball, which was a toy in the 70s, where you ask it a yes or no question, you shake the ball, and like this little triangle comes up in the window on the bottom and says things like, yes, that's conceivably possible, or no way, or something like that. So there's that opportunity. And then going on, oops, I'm advancing on the wrong place. Here we go. So
Don, can I cut in real quick and ask a question?
Sure. Yeah.
So on that last one, I feel like there's a lot of awesome creativity with coming up with that game show activity. How would you use your storyboarding with that, or pair programming, when you're giving them that much choice, so that they can create something fun but not get so overwhelmed?
Well, there, I think in particular, the storyboarding is really important, because they're going to have different screens based on what option the person chooses. Like the sample solution that's provided is, what type of vegetable are you? So on each screen, there's 4 different choices depending on the question. And so there are multiple outcomes based on what you click in terms of the score. So like I said, that's where storyboarding is really important, so you can anticipate what types of backgrounds you need, how many backgrounds you need, what other sprites you'll need. And in terms of pair programming, I guess that's really depends on what the students decide that they want to work on together. So by Unit 4, hopefully you're at a point where you've really cultivated a community in your classroom, and students have had the opportunity to work with many other people in the room, many other their peers, and so there's some comfort with the other students, and they're just sort of really comfortable and looking forward to collaborating with their colleagues.
Nice, thank you. It looks like Melanie has a question where she'd like to know a little bit more about storyboarding, and if you do it digitally or on paper, or how do you kind of set that up?
So I have the students do it on paper, and it's just basically drawing cells like a cartoon, and they have to label things like how the transition works, what parts are clickable in the animation. One of the things I show my students early on in Unit 3 when we start talking about storyboarding is there's a really nice YouTube video that shows somebody walking through the storyboard of a scene in Toy Story. And it really gives the idea, like, why would we want to do storyboarding, and what are the types of information that you would want to have in the storyboard? Of course, for a web page and animation, it might be a little different because our animation is a little more dynamic and there are things moving around. You don't want the storyboards to be too specific because you want your students to be able to not to spend too much time on that and move forward into the animation, but they should know the direction that their program is going to go so they don't get stuck in the middle and either have to rewrite everything or get lost in their program.
Thank you. Looks like Mandy uses Google Slides. What about some of the rest of you? What kinds of ways do you bring in storyboarding with your students? Remember, a lot of you are unmuted. You're more than welcome to speak if you'd like. Looks like Sean is going to be sharing something with us. I know I've tried a few different things. I actually created a fun little paper template where at the top it has all the different characters going down the side, and then going across. It's like, in what scene are they going to be? Are they going to be showing? Are they going to be hiding? Where are they going to be at, like their coordinates? So I've tried to like help them organize their stuff, but then it seems like sometimes they get bogged down with too much. So I like, Don, that you have that they can sketch it out to get those kind of rough ideas. It looks like, Shauna, this is the first time you've taught it. Have you been able to go to a professional development, Shauna, where they did some storyboarding in any of their activities, or is that something that you get to go to in one of your quarterly professional developments, or is this kind of the first time you've heard of storyboarding as you work with Scratch and animation and programming?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Am I too loud? Sorry. I don't know.
Oh.
Okay. Anyway, no, I went to the summer one, the week-long professional development CS training 2 summers ago or something, maybe 3, and then I was also at the summer conference when you were teaching. I'm in Utah, so I was also at the summer conference when you were teaching ideas for computer science, exploring computer science. And so I've got, I kind of have some ideas about storyboarding. The one thing, this is why I'm here, is for this. I'm almost done with our problem solving unit because we're doing it in a semester. That's how we're running it. And so then I'll be moving on to Scratch. So I just kind of wanted to get some thoughts on this, and truly the Scratch part is the one that I'm the most nervous about. I'm one of the novice. And so just trying to get everything figured out on this. So the one question I do have, Don, is all of this information that you've got for the lesson changes. I have the version 7 book, and I'm going pretty close, by that book, and I knew that version 8 is coming out. So is this online? And then are there like more detailed instructions on how to run these different things in our classes, like the different projects?
Version 8 you can download from the exploringcs.org site, so it's live, it's posted there. And really, in terms of running these, it's not much, it's not different than in version 7 or older versions. It's just that the focus of the assignments is a little different in terms of asking students to tell us a little bit more about themselves or think about their own experiences in terms of the type of projects they're asked to do. And then with the other addition that, and you can choose to do this or not if you want to do peer reviews and get students involved in giving feedback to each other. So that's the other option. The only thing that's changed really in terms of CS content is the addition of creating your own custom blocks, and what we call abstraction. So a couple of examples I have in here, which I'm going to get, if I go to the next slide, I can talk about that, and I've got to have a screenshot of what I mean by custom blocks. Is it okay if I head to that?
Sure.
Okay. So then in the next, lessons that have been changed, the create a program using abstraction and custom blocks. I'm going to go to the next slide, which I think shows a little bit more about what I mean. And this is sort of a sample. I don't know how well you can see this, but it doesn't start out with this. It's an animation for this spaceship to fly to these different planets. And the idea that if we want to change the order which the flying saucer goes to the planets, we're going to have to reorder a bunch of blocks in the written version that's presented to the students as the sample as one of the solutions. So the idea that we could create our own blocks over here, which I can't remember what I called them, like fly to Mars or go to Neptune or whatever, that's each of these represent here. So individual movements to these planets. So if we want to change the order, all we do is have to change around these couple blocks here rather than rewriting the whole program. And so that's what we mean by abstraction, that this new block represents these more detailed instructions, and the idea that we want to have our students start thinking about in computer science what we call managing complexity. In other words, designing our programs in a way that are easily readable by other people so they know what happens. And the example I give to my students frequently is when you go to the ATM machine, when you hit withdraw cash, a lot of things happen in the background in the machine. All you're concerned with is that you get the cash comes out. So in terms of abstraction, for all you know, there are magical pixies inside that are printing the money and stuffing it through the slot. It's completely plausible. But so the withdraw cash represents a bunch of more complex things that happen with your bank in order for you to get that money. But we as the user don't need to know that. All we need to know is that we get the cash. And that's what these custom blocks represent, that we're disguising the more detailed blocks with just a simple command like fly to Mars. So let me back up. I hope that wasn't too much. I got to realize that I'm not teaching a class here or teaching the unit. So then the next projects, create a dance program. And Joey, I tried to put this in a slide, but it didn't work. But there it is, the YouTube video. You can go and check that out. And it's another example of an opportunity for students to design their own blocks, and each custom block would represent a dance move. And this foreshadows a project in the robotics unit, which they'll create a dance program for their robot. So it gives them a little experience here. And then the final one is using a timer, and that was the sample of the blocks I had at the beginning here in this slide, where they would create some type of, this is the twirl around, I'm sorry. In the timer program, they have to create some kind of block that represents timer of a game or some type of experience. So let me see. I already showed this, the space travel sample. Once again, all of these are in the supplemental materials that you can download from the ECS site. So all the solutions for all the projects are in there. Please don't make them public on Scratch. We want to keep them to ourselves, but you can run them and look at them. And I'll put my email address on here, and you could for sure contact me if you have any questions, especially if you find mistakes. I would like to know that.
Now, quick question, Don. If you'll go back
yes.
to the space-time one.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm a new teacher into Scratch, what am I going to see when I first open the file that you have on the Exploring Computer Science site?
The first thing you'll see is the program which works, where the spaceship flies here to Mars, then to Saturn, and then down here, I think that's Neptune, I don't remember, maybe it's Pluto, and then back here to Earth. And so there's a bunch of blocks here, a really long column of blocks that has the spaceship do that. And so then the question posed to the students, and in the lesson, it gives some more specific directions about how you might consider posing this to the students. But can we change this? So what if we want the spaceship to go to Saturn first, then to Mars, and then to Pluto, and then back to Earth? What would we have to do? And actually, there's an in-class assignment for doing this twirl around, where you could have students actually act this out. So with using index cards, and somebody represents the number of times, and they hand that written on an index card to somebody who then executes the loop, and somebody that represents the command inside the loop does the actual twirling. So there's that option if you want to do that. That's suggested in the lesson.
Nice. I like that you bring in that kinesthetic movement. I know when we used to have the baseball diamond, I got a huge shower curtain from the dollar store, and I got baseball diamonds cut out of paper, and I put them underneath the shower curtain, and the students had to see how many steps it would physically take, and they would, on paper, kind of sketch out what commands would they use with the baseball diamond we had in class. And it really helped a lot of my English language learners as they were figuring out how it worked. Because again, I would have the motion blocks, and I'm like, ooh, if we do this glide, who can do some cool dance moves? And I'm like, how can we glide up to first base? And so as I'm looking at some of these blocks you can define, those are good ways to bring those kinesthetic learners in, is to bring in those index cards. I like that. And then to pass it over to someone else can be a number and whatever. That's great to bring those in and to do that pair stuff, that think, pair, share. Because I think those are things that we don't want to forget when we get into the programming unit, is all of that collaboration that you're having students do to think together, or do kind of like a journal, write on it or something.
Right, and I totally agree. And I think the corollary to storyboarding, the corollary in Unit 6 for robotics to storyboarding in Units 3 and 4 is actually having students get up and act out what the robot would do. Have them be the robot, and in your classroom, do the sequence of commands, and that will help them figure out the algorithm, actually physically doing it.
You bring out that word algorithm from Unit 1. I'd love to hear how some of the teachers that might be new to ECS, how you might see that activity in Unit 1, whether you make the peanut butter and jelly sandwich with the algorithm, how that might tie in to some of this stuff. Any thoughts on?
I know I'm taking up so much time. Anyway, so I love how you talked about in this, it would be like with the space travel one, the order. And I've been trying, we're going through problem solving right now, and I'm using algorithm and we're going over iteration and translation and all that stuff, and just the importance of seeing how a computer works using algorithms and on the back end of, those different things, and the concept of just tying all of these projects back. And so with that peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it'd be good to just utilize the importance of finding the most efficient way to do things and how it needs to be done in a specific order. Otherwise, it's not going to work very well. And so like you said, with the space travel, it would work very much that way, I think. Anyway.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from some of our folks who are joining us? We're up to 11 people. This is awesome. Let's hear from y'all.
Hi, this is Mandy. I'm really new to the CS for everyone, even though I've been in technology because I was prior Air Force and retired, and now I'm a first year technology teacher. But this is kind of new, but the Scratch isn't that new. But what you guys are doing is pretty awesome, and I just been mostly using code.org for some kind of curriculum to teach with.
Okay.
So,
Are you looking to venture out where the students have more options to explore creativity and have less of a prescribed scenario of what they're supposed to do?
yes, I'm actually looking for, just basically where I could teach the topic and then they get to choose the platform to work on. So whether that's Khan Academy, Code.org, CS for All, I'm looking for just different options that would better cater and, like you said, just explore the creativity, because I want students to know that this is the task, but there's multiple ways to do it.
Awesome. I think that a lot of times students, when they see blocks, are like, oh my gosh, that's like for little kids, that's easy stuff. But I always show them this great video from Dan Garcia, who's from Berkeley, who talks about the purpose of using blocks is to help students be able to create and create quickly without worrying about syntax. So I like the fact that you said you want students to be creative and know there's multiple ways to do things. I feel like that's a great opportunity in Scratch. In the ECS curriculum, they have tasks, as Don mentioned, of here's what we'd like you to create or do, but there's no like, I do, you do, we do on how to do it. And I feel like that's where a lot of that creativity comes in and that collaboration piece. Any other thoughts on that, Dan or Don, on how the way that the ECS curriculum is written, how that fosters a lot of that problem solving and creativity is tied together?
I guess I can speak on this a little bit. So what I like about ECS is that the earlier units kind of give students a more concrete idea of what it means to problem solve. You know, we tell our kids that they should do it and they should get better at it, but I love how the units are set up to give them a clearer pathway, and then in units 5 and 6, they really get to kind of branch out a bit and be more creative with their projects and choosing more creative results, which then allows them a more creative path to that result. But I totally understand what she was saying is that, you know, we have courses where they're more independent research-like, and we have a lot of students who do take advantage of that and really branch out. But ECS kind of gives them that foundation of what it means to create a design an algorithm. You know, what does it mean to storyboard, and how do you give each other critical reviews or feedback without making it negative. You know, ECS kind of provides a lot of those basic ideas.
So this reminded me of something I heard this summer, and I was at the Computer Science Teachers Association conference in Omaha, and I was listening to a computer science teacher from England talking about their initiative there, which is essentially K through 12 computer science, and he was going through some of the feedback that they received from some teachers, and they use Scratch there throughout most of the curriculum all the way through high school. And he said, that some of the responses he got from some teachers was that it looked a little too elementary school-like, the interface, and so some of the teachers were thinking, like, how robust could this be? And his response, which I thought was really a great response, was that you're focusing too much on the tool and not enough on the computer science concepts that you can teach with it. And I don't mean that to sound preachy. I just thought it was an interesting perspective in terms of Scratch. I love Scratch, and just two more things to say about it. One is it's an absolute unique community. There's probably no other online community on the planet where you will find such a range of abilities. You have everything from 4-year-olds posting projects to doctoral students and professors at universities and beyond posting projects in the same community and sharing. I think that's really unique. And the last thing, I'm going to post a link to something that I discovered just fishing around in the Scratch community. And there's also a link to this in Unit 4, because I just think it's spectacular and something that probably we don't think about, or maybe our students don't, but here's this giant community of all these people, and you could really create your own TV show. And that's what this young woman has done. I believe she's from Australia, but I'm going to post a link to it. It's called The Color Divide, and there are 8 episodes. I think there's 8, and they're just really outstanding. And maybe you will find them as incredible as I do. But there you go. Really well done, and you could see, like, just some of the sort of advanced things and how complex things you can do in Scratch. So I'll just leave it at that. So. Can't hear you, Nicole. Are you muted?
Okay, thanks, Don. The dance animation doesn't play, but you did put the link. Joey put the link in here. Do you want to tell us anything about this project or some of the code behind it or anything, or do you want to kind of bring that up in the next set of activities?
Well, yeah, there's a link there for it. I don't want to take up too much more time because I want Dan to be able to talk about some of the cool things that are happening at his school, especially for those of you that have joined us that are wondering, like, what's beyond ECS, But once again, just the dance animation is sort of foreshadowing a project in the robotics unit. It's another opportunity for students to be creative and demonstrate or show us something about themselves. And the YouTube link, the music doesn't quite sync up because I had to convert it from the FLV format to MP4, and so that conversion sort of changed the syncing, but it's close. So Dan, do we want to go to you? And
yeah, I mean, if that's it. Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about you, Dan, and then some of the projects that you've done beyond ECS or with some of your classes.
So I guess I was asked to be on this panel. So at the school that I teach at, Lane Tech High School, just to give you a little bit of a background, we now have a little over 1,800 students taking computer science courses. It's a school of 4,600, so it's still less than half, but we have a large number of kids in our school who are involved in our department in one way or another. And that's resulted in 11 different computer science courses ranging from exploring computer science all the way to things like intro to artificial intelligence. We have an incubator lab. We had the first maker course in Chicago Public Schools. So, you know, we have a wide variety of different courses. And one of the choices that we made pretty early on was, you know, if we have kids coming out of exploring computer science, how do we accommodate these students? How do we give them options to do more than just programming? You know, if you're from the field or from computer science or from technology, you sort of realize that programming is a very small slice of a very large pie. And, you know, exploring computer science is so creative and it has so many creative outlets. We didn't want to take all of those kids and tell them, well, your only option is APCSA and you're going to learn how to program in Java for a year. So we designed our courses to hopefully be as creative as ECS. It definitely is a foundational course for us. We have 12 computer science teachers at Lane Tech, and we try to make sure that all 12 of our teachers are teaching ECS, you know, if not every year, then every other year. So we have a lot of courses. But I think Don asked me to be on this panel to talk about our Lane of Things project. So we have a project where we collaborate with the Array of Things. So the Array of Things is a larger project that is NSF funded. And the idea behind the Array of Things is they're going to install 500 sensor nodes around the city of Chicago and collect data, you know, from, you know, about air pollution, about people walking around, about car traffic, light data, sound data. And the idea is that with 500 nodes around the city, they would have a high-resolution map of all of the environmental information of the city. And all of that data is going to be open to the public, and the eventual goal is to allow the public to create projects around that data. So we got hooked up with them, and we are the educational wing of it. So we have taken their large 500 sensor array project and brought it to our school. We are in the 4th year of it, but in the first 2 years actually, the students created arrays of sensors that they mounted around the school. To stick with the idea of being creative, we allowed every student team to choose the data that they wanted to collect. You know, did they want to collect data on sound? Did they want to collect data on light? And the way we framed it was they had to come up with the question first. So some students were interested in, you know, how much vibration does one stairwell take, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? You know, how loud is one hallway during lunch periods? So they had these really interesting questions, and one group mounted a breathalyzer inside the lunchroom to check on whether or not kids are drinking, which it was a weird one. But we allowed the student group to choose what they wanted to ask and how they wanted to collect that data. And that was the most interesting thing for us, was what happens when you give students the freedom to collect the data they wanted to collect. So the first 2 years we collected data around our school, and in our 3rd year last year, we decided to leave our building, and we worked with the Chicago Cubs, and the kids mounted an array of sensors in Wrigley Field, and we collected data based on the questions that the Cubs wanted answered. You know, so they wanted to know things like, when do the fans leave the upper deck? You know, what's causing them to leave the upper deck, and when do they do it? They had questions like, were fans happy when they left Wrigley Field? Would they come back? Did they have issues? So they, you know, the Cubs were very interested in keeping their customer base happy. The other thing the Cubs were really interested in was whether or not the surrounding neighborhoods were happy with nighttime concerts. So to give you an idea of how these sensors sort of work, with the nighttime concerts one, our kids had to design a sensor node that was waterproof and weatherproof and we mounted them at certain distances away from Wrigley Field so that we could collect sound data over, mapped over distances. And we would collect data anytime there was a nighttime concert and provide that data back to the Chicago Cubs. And when we were done with the project, we left all the sensors in place and gave the Cubs the ability to collect data on their own. So that was the project last year, and it culminated this summer with the team that all the teachers that the team is on. We started a summer workshop, a summer PD called the School of Things, where we've taken all of that curriculum and packaged it into a bundle. And the idea is that we are going to release it into the public and allow other schools to do the same thing where they are. So once that's nice and polished up, it's kind of like in a really advanced draft at this point, but we want to make sure that it's all polished up. We ran it through a week-long PD this summer with about 10 teachers. So we have the results from that PD. We're using the results from that PD to kind of work up the final draft of the curriculum. But once it's done, we'll publish it, and hopefully people out there will take it and iterate on it and let us know what went right and what went wrong. I think that's it.
So Dan, that sounds super exciting. As the teacher of that, how do you manage 500 sensors and all those kids?
So it was me and another teacher, Jeff Solon. We've worked very closely together the last few years, and Don knows him very well. Jeff and I combined our two courses. He teaches a course centered around design within a Maker's Lab, and I teach a course centered around electronics, and we call it our physical computing lab. So on top of teaching exploring computer science, I also teach that physical computing lab course. And we sort of combined our courses, and we combined the kids from both courses into teams. So we had approximately 120 kids that we combined into 48 to 50 teams. There were a lot of really fancy spreadsheets to do grade checks and milestone checks. There was a lot of after-school meetings. We used tools like GroupMe to help manage student discussions. We had created meeting templates in Google Spreadsheets and shared it out with the students and had them document their meetings so they could turn in their meeting notes to us as grades. So we tried to keep it as real, quote-unquote, real life as possible, but placing checks in place where Jeff and I were able to peek into their process and provide feedback and to answer questions when they had them. And because we were using a tool like GroupMe, we were able to answer a lot of questions in real time.
Awesome. Now thinking of some of the folks, or a lot of the folks on the webinar tonight, they teach ECS. What activities in ECS or what units do you feel helps prepare students to do something fun like this where they're using it out in the real world?
So there was a tremendous amount of planning and sketching. So within ECS, all the discussions we have in Unit 2 where kids are talking about the 4 phases of problem solving, those phases never leave our classrooms. We bring it up all the time. Kids are expected to be able to journal and design on paper. Somebody earlier had asked whether or not storyboarding, whether or not we do storyboarding on paper. In my classroom, we absolutely do. Not only in their journal, but on posters so that their storyboards can be shared out and they can present it and talk about it. It gives them the opportunity to practice explaining their complex ideas to a large audience. Our more advanced classes definitely lean on those tools that they've learned in ECS. Unit 5, the data analysis course, definitely comes into play with our more advanced courses. Most of our teachers at Lane have fairly involved projects in Unit 5. At Lane Tech, in Unit 5, we've kind of shifted from the curriculum a little bit, and we started implementing large-scale data collection projects, which allows us to practice our data analysis skills, and the students get a chance to take what they learned in that part of ECS in that later course as well. And then finally, Unit 6 is robotics class. We don't do robotics anymore at Lane. We turned our Unit 6 course into a physical computing course where the kids work with the microbit. And so the kids get an opportunity to experience, just like robotics, to get the experience taking what happens within the computer and placing it outside of it and seeing a direct physical result of all the things that we've been talking about. It gives them a connection from scratch to a servo that moves back and forth, or to a temperature sensor that is displaying the current temperature. It allows them to kind of make the connection, so to speak.
Well, that's awesome. I wonder, have you ever had any students who hadn't? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Joey.
I just had a quick question because this is super cool. I'll put my webcam on since I'm hosting as well, and so I'm not this like faceless voice. So I really like the idea of this sort of citizen computer science that you're talking about, how this connects to ECS. And so I was curious if you had connected this at all. Have you heard of the UN Sustainable Development Goals? I'm putting a link into the chat box, but basically these are these like 17 goals that have been sort of formulated across the globe that are these global issues that people are working on, and within each of those are different types of problems and projects and things that people are doing in relation to it. And so I'm just curious because it sounded like some of the stuff you were doing was related to that, and I wasn't sure.
No, I've never heard of it. I'm going to definitely check that out, though. I mean, like you mentioned, citizen computer science and the idea that the tools that the students are learning can directly impact their immediate community. It's definitely something that can be very inspiring. It's sometimes with ECS, or not ECS, but sometimes with CS, we lose ourselves in the technicality of whatever it is we're learning, as Don mentioned earlier, or was it Nicole who mentioned the Dan Garcia video, where we lose ourselves and we're teaching the tool and not the actual computational practices, because we wind up focusing on the wrong thing, whereas a tool is just a tool. The end result, what we can do with that tool, is what's more important. And at least at our school, we've tried to shift a lot more in that direction. City of Chicago has the open data portal, which is amazing. There's a lot of things wrong with Chicago, but one thing they do very well is they make public a lot of the data they collect around the city, and it's been great exposing students to the idea that they can take computer science concepts and they can take what they've been learning in ECS and really make an impactful change around them.
Well, I think that's important, Dan, because we just started Unit 2 today in my ECS class, and I told my students you have to come up with some kind of a problem you want to solve. We talked about it as a class, like let's brainstorm, each group come up with some ideas, how do we want to address this? And I think that if they see that there is data already being collected, that can help them feel like they really can make a difference in their community. It's not just something they have to do by themselves, but they can take something and apply it. So that's awesome that Chicago has that data available. I don't know if Utah has that data available, maybe some others that are on the call from Utah or other cities. Maybe that's something that you want to look into and see if there is a data portal that has information that your students could use as they work through their Unit 2 problem solving, or even as they do Unit 5 with data. And Unit 6, how can they then take that data collection and physical computing and come up with something awesome and amazing?
Yeah, I was
going
to...
Yeah. Go.
Oh, sorry, one last thing, Don, sorry. I just posted a link to Planario. It is an open data tool where people from all over I believe the country, I'm not sure if it's international yet, but people from all over the world has linked open data sets on there. All of Chicago stuff is on there, so maybe if you're from another city, maybe it's worth peeking to see if your city is in there and to see if you can use that tool to visualize that data.
So, and I just added a link to a Forbes article that had 85 U.S. cities and links to their data portals.
So I guess what I wanted to say is for the people on this call, especially the ones that are just getting started with computer science and teaching computer science, don't feel overwhelmed by this. Hopefully you're excited by what Dan said and some of these opportunities. But if you're thinking about, wow, how do I ever do this, or where do I start? The place to really start is with your students and their interest. A great way to keep students involved in wanting to learn more computer science is ask them about what they see in their communities and how computer science or learning more about computing can help them learn more about their communities and maybe solve a problem or just investigate it more. So starting with the students and asking what they want and then moving from there one step at a time is really something manageable and something that you can learn together with your students.
Thank you, Don. I think that's super powerful, and that's something that I really appreciate about the Exploring Computer Science curriculum is that it allows for a lot of teacher choice. It gives you a framework of where to start. It gives you some ideas and some suggestions of tools, but it really allows you as a teacher to know your students and find out how you can connect them into computer science. We've only got a minute or so left, so I do want to make sure that those of you who are new to Exploring Computer Science are aware that you can get the version 8 of ECS curriculum at the exploringcs.org site. You go up to curriculum, download, you put your name in there, and you get the immediate PDF of the curriculum. There are Scratch files, as Don mentioned, where you as a teacher have the answer key files as well as the files you want to share with students that are kind of starter files. So you want to make sure you differentiate between the two so you're not posting the solutions. That wouldn't be so good. There are a lot of resources on csforallteachers.org. There's an ECS open group that you can join. And in the open group, there are the different units of Exploring Computer Science in there, and you can go to Unit 4 and see a lot of the different ways that teachers have shared ideas. I'm sure that there are lots of things from experienced ECS teachers from all over the nation. Don also mentioned the Scratch community, that it's a huge community of elementary through college, professors and teachers and all over the world. So that scratched.gscharvard.edu, that is that education group that you can go in and get all sorts of scaffolding resources or ideas to challenge some of those students that may have a lot of experience. And so I want to thank everyone for joining us, especially Don and Dan. They're giving us an evening of expertise that you don't get very often unless you go to a conference or their professional development. So that's super exciting. And I want to thank those of you that were able to join. It is a recorded webinar, so if you want to come back and view it again because you want to hear some of the ideas that were shared, you are welcome to come back and join, and I will let Joey wrap us up.
Great. So thank you so much, Nicole, for hosting. Thank you, Don and Dan, for being a part of this. You can see on the screen we've got a couple activities that are coming through our community. On November 5th, we have a webinar on online professional learning for teachers of CS on November 8th. We have a webinar on that CS. You may be surprised to know that learning activities that you're already doing are the basics of it, and so that's more focused for elementary school and middle school teachers. And then we have a few other things that are coming later on. We also encourage you to take a minute. I put a link in the chat box to the survey. We always like to get feedback to make sure that we are providing the best possible support for you. And so please take a minute. It will take literally a minute to fill out that survey. But we are always excited to have you on here, especially we appreciate all the time and effort you take to show up at the end of a busy day to learn more and to develop yourselves even more. And so thank you so much to everyone who's been on here, who's been asking questions, and people who've just been listening. And we're excited to have you again. Take care, everyone.
Have a great night.